Right, I'm going to go ahead and go over the research paper assignment. Going to go ahead and share my screen. One of the first things I wanted to mention, though, and this is something that I noticed with the modified literature review, is that a lot of students kind of get in this habit that when they go into Canvas, they just go off of what's on the to-do list. Now, for these assignments, the major assignments in this course, I do have it set up where it makes it really difficult, right? So if you just have this to-do list and you're not looking at stuff in the modules, and you should be accessing everything through the modules section in this course, right? You shouldn't just click on the to-do. A good analogy for this is it would be like completely ignoring me, completely ignoring the PowerPoints, the textbook, and just doing assignments in a class. You shouldn't do that, right? Taking a class isn't just passing assignments. It's learning the information, and then the assignments are meant to see how well you learned it. Now, I'm saying this because if you do just click on the to-do list, this is what I've seen students do and have the feedback, right? It'll say it's unavailable. It'll say you have to access it through modules. Now, I'm looking at the modified literature review here, but if I scroll down now, I go to modules, you see there's certain things you have to do. And for each of these major assignments, it'll be set up the same way. The first thing you have to do is view the page that is the instructions, and they are extensive, they are detailed. What I've seen a lot of students do is just click on that and be like, all right, that's done. Now I do the next part. Next part is the quiz that you have to do. And to be honest, I get it. Most of them are just yes, 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 right? So you can just pass that without even thinking about it. The problem though is, and I've seen several students do this with the modified literature review, you're expected to know that info. So it's not just clicking a page to say you clicked it and then going through a quiz and going yes, 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 so you can access the assignment. You're doing all that so that if you make a mistake and you don't do it correctly, I can go back and say the page had to be viewed. And then you did a quiz saying that you understand what's expected of you. So don't just click through those things. Don't just ignore them. It's critically important. All right. So enough about that. Let me leave the student view, and I'm going to pull up the research paper instructions. And just like with the modified literature review, they are extensive and they are detailed. Now, for this research paper, essentially what you're doing is just taking the research you already did and just putting it in a paper. That's it. So it is meant to be an extension of what you've already done. It's just now you're actually formatting it in your own words in a certain structure. It's an APA paper, so it has to be fully structured and organized like any APA 7th edition student paper. That means it has to have a title page, no abstract, and it has to follow all the rules. One warning I will give to all of you, you all took those courses through the library, right? And one of them was about APA and citations, referencing. Do not just assume that you can go to Word and type in APA template and it's correct. It isn't. Right? If I see things like a running head on there, which is not required anymore for APA 7th edition for a student paper, I know automatically you didn't put that there. Right? And I've seen it where it still has a little template block that says running head that shows up on Microsoft Word. You are accountable for making sure that it is APA 7th edition compliant on everything, including the references. In keeping with that, the references, if I checked them, and this happens sometimes, right? I had somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 assignments to grade. It's a lot. Did I catch every mistake made for the references? Probably not. I mean, just do the math, 150 some odd assignments. Each person had to include at least 10. That's 1,500 references I had to proofread. Just statistically speaking, there's a good chance some of them missed. Now, that being said, that probably benefited you, right? Don't tell me like, hey, you missed here where you should have taken off a point. But the reason why I'm saying this is double check those references again, because I have had students in past semesters where they used the same reference in the same way on the research paper, but not, didn't get marked off points in the lit review, but then on the paper they did. And they're like, well, you didn't tell me it was wrong. Well, you're still accountable for it, right? I may have missed it. I make mistakes. I am a human being. Usually those mistakes go in your favor, but you're still accountable for it. You're still responsible for making sure they're correct. All right. So you see the structures here for the instructions, right? It has to have a title page, again, no abstract. Has to be an introductory paragraph. In that introductory paragraph, you need to include your thesis statement and you need to highlight it. That's really important. That's not typical APA 7th edition. That's something I require because I want to be able to look at these 150 papers now I'm going to be reading and have it stand out and be clear. This is what your thesis statement is. Because when I read the rest of your paper, I'm going to be referencing it back to that. Are you hitting that thesis? You then need at least one clear, concise paragraph. You can do more, but it has to be at least one that talks about the research you're presenting that supports that thesis. That paragraph has to be at least 400 words minimum. That section has to be at least 400 words. After that, there should be a section presenting your opposing or alternate thesis, right? And remember, that's key. It isn't always an exact opposite. It could just be another way of looking at the problem. I have had students in the past do something like, what I mentioned earlier, rural America, right? If you're looking at barriers to ASD diagnosis and treatment in rural America, okay, that you're going to find some research on that. And you may be supporting your thesis that just in rural communities, there aren't access to these resources. But what if, here's an alternate view, it isn't rural versus urban. What if it's lower socioeconomic status? Basically, poverty is the bigger barrier. Well, that's an alternate view. Could both be correct? Yeah. And that's kind of the point of why I have that opposing or alternate view. I want you to challenge your own beliefs, to step outside the box, not just say, I think this is true. I'm going to find information that supports that I'm right. I'm not going to look at anything else. That is called a confirmation bias. I don't want assignments that are going to encourage confirmation bias. This is why I did this. Next component is the implication section. So in the implication section, you're really talking about how is this going to be usable? How is it going to be applied? If the answer to that is I don't know, you probably need to reevaluate the thesis and why you're doing this, right? And it can be multifaceted. If you're talking about a specific intervention or treatment, you can talk about why that intervention or treatment is useful or why it should be used more. If you're writing a paper that's more of like an advocacy thing, like you are doing something for like a specific marginalized community, my suggestion on that then is to talk about how that can be useful. And maybe if there aren't programs in place, there probably are, how a program could help overcome those barriers, right? You're not just saying there's a problem. You're saying there's a problem. Here's the solution. Here's how this information is useful in some way. And you kind of have carte blanche on that. Useful to you, useful in the world around us, useful in your future careers. There has to tie into some kind of implication. Next part on here is a personal reflection. So a discussion of the student's own reflection on the information they learned from this assignment. This is very subjective, right? So essentially the references you came up with, you're going to be using them for this supporting thesis section. You're going to be using it for this opposing thesis section. You're probably going to want to have one or two for this implications. And if you go over the 10 that are required, that's fine. You can use more. You just can't do less. But this personal reflection section, you shouldn't have anything in there besides your own words. There shouldn't be any citations, any references, right? Because it's a personal reflection. If you put a reference in there, it's kind of like saying, I don't know what to think and I can't describe it, so I have to use somebody else's words to tell me what to think. That doesn't look good. In addition to that, the intro and the conclusion shouldn't have any references either. The intro is where you're introducing the thesis. You're kind of giving me, I'm a foodie, y'all. You're giving me an appetizer. What's this paper about? Whet my appetite a little bit. You're allowed a little bit of subjectivity there. You're allowed a little bit of discretion. So it's not like if you say, in this paper, I'm going to talk about how ABA is the best intervention for children learning social skills that have ASD. You don't have to say there's a citation here that says it's the best if it's in the intro. Conclusion, likewise, you're kind of giving me dessert, right? Let me go home with a good taste in my mouth, thinking like, wow, this paper was really good. Tie it all together, reiterate your thesis, kind of summarize what you talked about in the paper. Now, my tip here is, and this is how I used to write papers when I was a college student, is I take each of those sections, right? Because this is in the rubric, you're gonna be graded on having each of these sections present. Each of them are gonna have a paragraph header. Now, the only one that isn't is the intro. I still do one when I'm kind of initially writing and formatting my paper, just as a reminder I need to do that part. But then once I'm done and I'm ready to submit it, I just make sure I take that introduction paragraph header out because it isn't required in the ABA format. Now, this is where that modified literature view comes in. You can literally start kind of coming up with ideas. So I'm going to pull up the student's paper. This is from a previous semester. It doesn't have anybody's name on it, and the student allowed me to use it. I can use that lit review and just start kind of plugging in information. So we all know that first two references from the lit review were opposing. Right? I already have a synopsis, an overview of what that article is about, and I have how I'm going to use it. So I can just start tying in certain details from this, either cut and paste it for right now. Like it says, ultimately about ABA therapy, this student was writing about parental involvement for any kind of intervention, right? So under the opposing thesis, I'm going to put that there. Am I leaving it just word for word? No, right? I'm going to rephrase it later. But I can kind of do what I call quilt making, right? I can just have a bunch of different entries, quotes. Maybe I can even come up here and cut and paste that in-text citation so I know where it comes from. So when it comes time for me to piece together all of these little individual quotes that I'll have in segments from that paper, I know where that information came from. Now I can go on. I can start doing maybe the supporting thesis and kind of so on and so forth. This shouldn't be difficult. This is only 2,000 words. And the 2,000 words are substantive writing. So it's not things like the title page. It's not things like the references. It's your actual words meeting the requirements for the assignment. Now, my general advice, if you're really unsure about writing, well, two things, right? The first one is if you're really unsure of writing, guess what, y'all? There is probably about 5 different resources here at USF that are free to you as a student to help you do your best with writing. Off the top of my head, Academic Success Center will help with this. There are tutors that help with it. The library, the librarians will help with it. I will help with it, right? Yeah. All free of charge. Use it. Taking that little extra step beforehand is way better than having to come up with reasons later as to why you got an F on the assignment. So that's the first little soapbox piece of advice. The second part, the way I write, is I write my whole body paragraphs. Like I pretty much have the paper written, and then I do my intro and I do my conclusion. That's just how I do it. I tend to think that it works a little bit better because remember, the intro is really introducing about the paper, kind of whet your appetite, it's the appetizer. That conclusion is kind of like the dessert. Well, I can't pair that with my main course if I don't even know what the main course is, right? I want a full meal. I told you I'm kind of a foodie, right? This is how I view it. Hopefully that kind of makes sense to all of you. Now, if you have a different way of doing that, that's fine. This isn't a one size fits all, like because that's the way I do it, it means you have to do it that way. I'm only presenting that as a little bit of advice. If you are one of those people that just kind of has some concerns, issues, maybe aren't really good with writing. The last little bit of information is on the instructions, you'll see where the reference section is going to be referenced a little bit differently from a normal APA paper. There will be a reference section A and a reference section B. That reference section A are all of the references that you needed from the modified literature review. So that means 2 references from academic peer-reviewed sources that are refuting or opposing views or an alternate view of your thesis statement. 3, academic peer-reviewed sources that are supporting your thesis. And then 5, references that can be from organizations, non-for-profits, government websites that are reputable, right? Not news stations, not blogs, right? Reputable sources. And that's your pick for those 5, right? They can be academic peer reviewed that support your thesis, that oppose it, present alternate views. It can be something that goes into your implications part. Now, if you go over those 10, that is what's going to be in that reference section B. Why do I do it like this? Because it's a requirement for you to have those references that I just mentioned. So I list them in that reference section A, and I can easily see that you met that component. Because again, if I'm grading 150 of these papers, you know how difficult it gets sometimes to sit there and make sure, right? It's kind of difficult. That's why I have this really structured approach. Now, each of those sections, the reference section A, reference section B, should be in alphabetical order because that's what the APA requires. If you only have those 10 references, then you don't need a reference section B, you just leave it off and you just do it like a normal APA paper with references with a paragraph header. If you decide to change your references, that is totally fine. You are not glued to the ones that are in a modified literature review, but keep in mind, I did at least look over those. So if you're changing anything drastically, and definitely if you're changing the thesis statement, especially dramatically, and you haven't contacted me, you probably would want to contact me just to make sure you're getting that component. Because again, if you don't, it's going to be a lot of penalties. It's going to be higher penalties on that. All right.